So in today's presentation, we're going to be doing a brief survey of medieval Arabic Christian epistemology. So some of the texts that we will be examining are Ibn Tayyib's On Knowledge and Miracles, and we will be reading this text and discussing it in full. Hunayn ibn Ishaq's On How to Discern the Truth of Religion. We will not be reading this in full, but instead we'll just be discussing and reading large excerpts of it. And Yahya ibn Adi's On the Truth of the Gospel by Way of Reasoning from Proofs, which we will also be reading in full and discussing. So, a brief biography on our first philosopher, Abu al-Faraj Abdullah ibn Tayyib al-Iraqi. So, he was an 11th century physician, philosopher, and biblical exegete. He was a contemporary of Avicenna, although Avicenna he is active a little bit after him, but they're from around the same sort of time frame, so mid 11th century, early 12th century. He served as the secretary to two Assyrian Church of the East, aka Nestorian primates, Yohanna ibn Nazuk and Ilya I. He authored what would become the most influential Arabic commentary on the Bible in the medieval world. He also wrote commentaries on the works of Galen, Porphyry, and Aristotle. His work really transcends sort of denominational and sectarian lines, and his massive corpus of writings is used and cited by a lot of medieval Assyrian, Coptic, and Syriac Orthodox writers alike. So I couldn't find any images of this particular thinker, so as a sort of respectful way of representing him pictorially, I decided to include an icon of the Transfiguration taken from a medieval Assyrian Church of the East manuscript in lieu of an actual illustration of Ibn Tayyib. So, he begins by saying, in the religion of the Christians, rational proof, al-Burhan in Arabic, is nobler than miracles because rational proof is proof by which the intellect comes to grasp the truth of the claim of those who have miracles. His own investigation, the investigation of his circumstances, and the circumstances of those who are making the claim, and the state of the matter with regard to the claim. Rational proof is for the elites and the philosophers and the scholars who are not led except by it, while miracles are for the masses whose breasts are not delighted by certain knowledge, and who only believe what they behold by the senses. So it is clear that rational proof is evidence which convinces through knowledge and is for the elites, and that miracles are evidence which convince through the senses, and they are for the masses. So we see a very strongly rationalist text. Miracles are subordinated to rational proofs. And we see evidence of a dualistic, very elitist epistemology, as it were, whereby rational proofs are intended for philosophers and scholars. It's the common masses, the simple folk, as it were, who rely on sense data and must depend on miracles to have knowledge of religious truths. And so he continues. Scriptural evidence that knowledge is nobler than miracles is from when Paul, the chosen and heavenly apostle, says, God appointed in his church the apostles first, and after them the prophets, and after them the scholars, and after them those who work miracles, and after them those who heal the sick, and after them those who possess languages. And so the word rendered scholars here in Arabic is al-ulama. In the Textus Receptus, in the Greek Textus Receptus, so the manuscript tradition underlying a lot of popular English translations such as the New King James, the original King James, the word translated here as scholars is teachers, but the Arabic manuscript line that Ibn Tayyib is working off of, it renders this passage or this word as ulama, which means scholars. Continuing, he says, from this evidence it becomes known that knowledge is nobler than miracles. Then he says, the elders who ordered the affairs of the church well deserve multiple recompense, especially those who toil with knowledge. And similarly, the Arabic word used here is ilm. He goes on to say, so rational proof is rational evidence, and miracles are sensible evidence. If the intellect is nobler than sensation, then rational proof is nobler than miracles. Miracles are found in a specific place and at a specific time and among specific people. If that place and that time and that people cease, then the miracle ceases with them. Rational proof is found in all places and at all times and among all peoples. So knowledge and rational proof are nobler than miracles. Thus Christ our Lord worked miracles for the common people and the masses and set forth evidence and rational proof for the excellent philosophers who are not led by miracles and make no use of them. And he concludes his essay with the doxology, Glory to God forever. So we could argue that there are similarities here with Platonist epistemology if we think back to the allegory of the cave in Book 7 of the Republic. Those remaining in the cave are those who rely on illusory and unreliable sense data, as it were. They are perhaps comparable to the masses, quote unquote, the masses whose breasts are not are not delighted by certain knowledge and who only believe what they behold by the senses, if we want to use Ibn Tayyib's verbiage. It is the scholars and philosophical elite relying on rational proofs, or burhan, as it's rendered in Arabic. They might be likened to those who escape the cave and engage in truly rational contemplation and intellection. We could also argue that there are certain Aristotelian or Averroist currents to his epistemology. So, with respect to Averroist epistemology, Averroist believed that not all people are able to find truth through philosophy, which is why the law speaks of 3 ways for humans to discover truth and interpret scripture. And the law in this context is referring to the divine law, God's law, as it were. So there are 3 ways for humans to discover truth and interpret scripture in the Averroist sort of epistemology or Averroist worldview. There's the demonstrative, the dialectical, and the rhetorical. These 4 Ibn Rushd, or Averroes, divide humanity into philosophers, theologians, and the common masses. And so Averroes himself derives much of his epistemology from the epistemology outlined by Plato in his rhetoric and in his topics. And we see an illustration of that here. So we have demonstrative or pure logic, we have dialectical reasoning, what we might call intuition or common sense, and we have rhetoric, which is symbolic reasoning. And these 3 types of knowledge, as it were, divide the masses or the people into 3 epistemological categories. So our next thinker is Hunayn ibn Ishaq. He is sometimes known as the Nestorian physician. He too, like Ibn Tayyib, was an adherent of the Assyrian Church of the East and one of the central figures of the translation movement of the early Abbasid period. His mastery of Greek, Syriac, Persian, and Arabic allowed him to translate many magisterial works of ancient philosophy into Arabic. He also served as the personal physician of Al-Khalif al-Mutawakkil, and besides his translation work, he does have a large corpus of original writings, primarily in the field of medicine. And the illustration or the picture we see here on the right, that is Ibn Ishaq as he appears or as he is depicted in Assassin's Creed Mirage. So, in his essay on how to discern the truth of religion, we immediately see a rejection of tradition and appeals to various authorities. He begins by saying, indeed, if someone says that belief has come to him by way of his ancestors, or if he says that belief has come to him by way of a book, or from a prophet who has performed miracles, or from his own opinion, since he holds to a certain viewpoint and to him his own religion is confirmed to be true through it, all the adherents of the religions who disagree with him would be able to say something similar. If that response is common among all the adherents of the different religions, it must be necessary then for whoever accepts his religion on the basis of this argument to embrace any other religion on account of this same argument. But if he does not accept such an argument from those who disagree with him, then he should not accept this argument from the followers of his own religion. And so immediately we see a rejection of appeals to tradition, ancestry, holy books, prophecy, or other appeals to authority. And his argument is that if an adherent of Christianity were to make such appeals, if they were to engage in such arguments, why wouldn't one reject other faith traditions which make the same claims of prophecies, miracles, holy men, etc.? And so, what are the reasons for accepting truth? Why might one accept the truth versus why might one accept falsehood? So he explains, to the one who says this, we say that truth and falsehood among all utterances are known by the reasons that prompted their acceptance in the first place. The reasons why a lie is accepted are different from the reasons why the truth is accepted. So he positions his argument by stating that those who accept truth versus those who accept falsehood do so for different reasons. And so why might one accept falsehood? He provides 6 reasons as to why one might accept a falsehood. The first reason is that one who accepts falsehood is forced to accept that which is made compulsory for him against his will. The second reason is that a person willingly tries to escape from hardship and oppression, since he was not able to bear them, so as to be delivered from them to what he hopes is ease and comfort. The third reason is that a person favors great might over humiliation, honor over inferiority, and power over weakness, so that he leaves his religion and converts to another. The fourth reason is that the one who speaks falsehood is a wicked man, deceitful in word, with the result that he beguiles and overwhelms whomever he invites to accept falsehood. The fifth reason is that the one who invites to falsehood exploits the ignorance of his invitees and their lack of literacy. The sixth reason is that there is a natural kinship between the invitee and the inviter, so that the invitee, not wishing to sever that shared kinship, agrees with him in his religion. So, what is the sort of important historical context for Ibn Ishat's reasoning here? So, I think it is worth a brief discussion on the status of non-Muslim subjects in Islam. So, the reasons for accepting falsehood, in his view, are primarily because one might want to escape from hardship or gain some sort of material advantage. Right? So, these are pertinent to reasons 1 through 3. Now, what's the historic context of Ibn Ishat's sort of milieu, intellectual milieu? What's the backdrop, the cultural backdrop of him writing this essay? Well, the Quran says, "Fight those who do not believe in Allah or in the last day, and who do not consider unlawful what Allah and His Messenger have made unlawful, and who do not adopt the religion of truth from those who were given the scripture. Fight until they give the jizya," that is the poll tax, "willingly while they are humbled." So, in reasons 1 through 3, is Hunayn ibn Ishat alluding to those converting to Islam due to social pressures? It certainly seems at least feasible. So, just a minor sort of historical point there to provide context to Ibn Ishat's writing. What are the reasons for accepting the truth? So, he provides 4 reasons why one might accept truth. The first reason is that the one who accepts the truth beholds miracles that the human faculties are incapable of performing. So we might say that this is a form of empiricism or proof from sense data. The second reason, he tells us, is that the manifest aspect of the truth to which the inviter offers an invitation is in fact evidence that testifies to the truthfulness of its hidden aspect. So we could say this is abduction or inference to the best explanation. So if one aspect of, let's say, the Christian religion seems true, if that seems manifestly true, we have good reason to believe that other aspects, other cardinal doctrines of the Christian faith are also true. The third reason is the decisive kind of proof that obliges one to accept it. The fourth reason is when the end of something corresponds to its beginning and when its origin, i.e. the valid statement following its valid precedent, is indisputable due to the validity of what preceded it. So we could say that this corresponds to proof from demonstrative or syllogistic logic. All right, so why might one embrace or believe in Christianity? He explains to us, this induces us to observe how we may know that all the other religions have been accepted on the basis of those first 6 characteristics, whereas the true religion, i.e. Christianity, has been accepted on the basis of the latter 4. So again, just as a reminder, he says that there are 6 reasons why one would embrace falsehood, 4 reasons why one might embrace the truth, and he's saying that Christianity is believed on the basis of the latter 4 rather than the first 6. So continuing, he says, with regard to the first reason, for the acceptance of a lie, the true religion is in fact not accepted through the great might of a king, nor through subjugation by a ruler, but rather all the kings and rulers of the earth have been hostile to it, and have forbidden all the people from accepting it by means of all kinds of torture and unseemly killing, and thus they have wiped them off the face of the earth. And yet this true religion has vanquished all of those rulers and has remained unshakable. So Christianity was not spread by the sword, is what he's saying. It was not imposed ad extra from the top down. Rather, it was persecuted. The nascent Christian church, the primitive Christian church, was persecuted under such emperors as Nero or Diocletian. So that can't possibly be one of the reasons why Christianity was accepted. Continuing. With regard to the second reason, the true religion has not invited people to flee from a life of hardship and difficulty to a life of plenty and ease, but rather it has called them from all the more plentiful and easier forms of life to the life that is harder and more difficult, to that which is almost an object of loathing, and yet has been accepted in the most excellent way. So we can consider, for instance, Christianity's emphasis on self-sacrifice and self-denial. Jesus said to his disciples in one of the gospel passages, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Continuing. With regard to the third reason, the true religion has not invited people from lowliness to high standing or from humiliation to great might, but rather it has called them from great might to humiliation, and yet it has been accepted even to the extent that whoever has accepted it would rather die than live at its cost. And similarly, we can compare that to what the Gospel of Matthew says when Jesus is quoted as saying, so the last will be first and the first last, for many be called, but few are chosen. And with regard to the fourth reason, the true religion is not received from wicked people and from the eloquent in speech. Rather, it is received from the ignorant and speech impaired, and from fishermen who might even be considered more silent and speech impaired than the fish. So, a very, as it were, classist way of putting it. But here he is referring to the humble origins of Christianity and Jesus' earliest followers. So we could point to Peter, Andrew, James, and John, who were fishermen by trade. These were not eloquent, lofty, learned men, but very simple people who were from the lower classes of society, the working classes, as it were, of society. With regard to the fifth reason, those who have accepted the true religion have in fact been neither ignorant, nor stupid, nor common, nor barbarian, but rather they have been people of logic and philosophy more than all the rest of the world, and they have been people of discernment and scholarship, those who surpass the rest of the people in wisdom. And so there's an interesting contrast between reason 4 and reason 5 here. So in the previous slide, he talks about Christianity's humble origins and how the first apostles, the first preachers of Christianity, were very simple, unlearned, unlettered people. Yet, in contrast, the earliest peoples to accept Christianity, according to the preaching of the earliest apostles, they were men of logic and philosophy. And so one could point to Christianity's very strong intellectual, philosophical, theological tradition in such luminaries as Paul the Apostle, Origen of Alexandria, Athanasius, Augustine, the Cappadocians, etc. Christianity was preached by the simple, but accepted by the learned and the wise. With regard to the sixth reason, it was not the case that whoever accepted the true religion was joined with those he loved and with his friends as a result of that acceptance. But rather, once that person accepted it, for its sake, he typically parted ways with everyone with whom he had common kinship, whatever that kinship might be, whether through close family ties or through loving affection. So here he is arguing that Christianity provides no social incentive for one to accept it. But take, for instance, instead the ostracization that many early Christian converts experienced from their non-Christian family and friends. Now, if you'd like to add a seventh characteristic reason, then look and see what the apostles made public knowledge about this religion, in comparison to which nothing appears more difficult. So here he is possibly alluding to early Christian traditions regarding the martyrdom of all but one of the 12 apostles. And this is an argument that comes up in a lot of apologetics and contemporary philosophy of religion circles within the context of Christian apologetics. Why would the apostles knowingly die for a lie? And so, continuing, Ibn Ishaq says, no one at all ought to say that if all these matters were like this, and hence our acceptance of whatever we believe apart from the display of signs and wonders, then proving the truthfulness of religion would be impossible except by an opponent who presents it out of his own expertise. And so, similar to his later co-religionist, Ibn Tayyib, miracles are subordinated to sort of more grounded intellectual proofs. If you say this, then seek for yourself, with respect to your religion as well as the others, what corresponds to what I have described to you regarding our religion. Indeed, you will notice that there is no comparison between us and them. So, according to him, Christianity alone can make these evidential truth claims, these evidence-based claims to be the one true religion. So, unpacking Ibn Ishaq's religious epistemology, how do we know that Christianity is true? So we could say that he is a sociological, as it were, epistemology. Christianity has survived against all odds and despite tremendous persecution, per reason one. Christianity goes against all of man's most base desires, and it is embraced by many. It was preached by simple, ignorant people, for simple, ignorant people. It encourages self-sacrifice, humility, subjugation, and even death for the sake of the truth. And the earliest apostles of Jesus were killed for spreading his message, per reasons 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. And that just ties back to what we were saying earlier. This is a very common argument in contemporary Christian apologetics surrounding the historicity of the resurrection. Why would the apostles knowingly die for something that is a lie? And that's something that's used by Christian apologists and philosophers of religion to lend credence to the truth claims of Christianity. He also seems to appeal to authority as well. So, despite the fact that Christianity was preached by the simple, originally for the simple, it was embraced by many lofty and learned people, and Christianity boasts for itself a robust intellectual and philosophical tradition. To use his phraseology, by people, quote, of logic and philosophy. And so, does Ibn Ishaq contradict himself a little here? He does initially, at the very beginning of his essay, reject appeals to authority, saying that adherents of other religions could make similar claims. But he later appeals to Christianity's acceptance by people of logic and philosophy as evidence of its truth claims. So, definitely a point worth contemplating. So, this brings us to our final thinker, Yahya ibn Adi. He was a Syriac Orthodox, sometimes known as Jacobite, philosopher and theologian. He was a student of the Church of the East philosopher Abu Bishr Metta ibn Yunus. He was also a student of the celebrated Muslim philosopher Al-Farabi. His Christian students include Al-Hasan ibn Suwar ibn al-Khammar, the latter of whom instructed Ibn Tayyib, who was the first thinker that we discussed in our presentation. In addition to Ibn Adi's translation work during his tenure at the Baghdad Beit al-Hikmah during the Abbasid Caliphate, he is the author of several original works of apologetics, philosophy, and theology. The two most important being On the Reformation of Morals and a treatise of divine unity according to the doctrine of the Christians. So, Yahya's On the Truth of the Gospel by way of reasoning from proofs. He begins by saying, among the evident proofs is that the pure gospel is accepted by many peoples whose countries are far from each other and who have different religions and diverse ambitions. It is not possible for one such as them to collude, nor is it thinkable that they would agree with one another. So one could point to the various pagan nations in the Old Testament who persecuted the Israelites only to convert to Christianity after the advent of Christ. So we can think of the Egyptian Copts, the Assyrians, the Romans, the Greeks. These were all pagan Gentile nations that persecuted the people of God in the Old Covenant, and they embraced Christianity very shortly after the advent of Christ in the first century AD. He notes that these various people groups are separated by a wide geographic distance, and they have differing cultural and political ambitions, and thus it is very unlikely that such peoples would conspire or collude with one another so as to embrace the gospel, to accept the gospel. Continuing, he says, if this is the case, then all things that are accepted either because of the reasons that something false is accepted or because of the reasons that the truth is accepted. The reasons for accepting something that is false are fear of being killed and degradation and poverty, the imposition of oppressive burdens, the constraints of the law, separation from relatives, proximity to pleasures, and the rebelliousness of desires, the desire for strength and power and easy circumstances and the acquisition of wealth, the desire for ease and calm and security and peace, laxity in the law, familial bonds, the allowing of total indulgence and pleasures, the permission to indulge in lusts, and the trickiness of those preaching and the foolishness of those who are preached to. The gospel contains the opposite of all these things, and their announcements of them all. It commands the bearing of degradation, the renouncing of seeking power, the love of poverty, patience with oppressive burdens, and the leaving aside of laxity in the law in favor of exactitude in it. It commands courage in bearing suffering, the laying aside of indulgence and pleasures, and the laying aside of worry in the face of dangers. It is manifestly clear that those who preach the gospel, that is, those who preach Christianity, were not trickier and cleverer than those to whom they preached. Most of those who preached were illiterate fishermen and craftsmen. They were not endowed with special knowledge or overwhelmingly strong understanding. As for those to whom they preached, these included the Romans and the Greeks, the masters of subtle wisdom, and the foremost in lofty knowledge. They possessed sharp intellects and penetrating insights. They could not be fooled by a trick or defeated by deception. No error is hidden from them, and they are not blind to erroneous expressions. Thus, it is clearly unimaginable that the gospel is accepted for one of those reasons by which falsehood is accepted. So we see reasoning that is very similar to that of Ibn Ishaq, who was an earlier 9th century contemporary of Yahya. Very similar reasoning. He similarly argues that falsehood is usually accepted for the sake of comfort and convenience, the accrual of wealth, power, other social advantages, whereas those who accept the gospel endure incredible hardships and persecution. And thus the gospel is not accepted for the reasons that falsehood is accepted. We see a similar sort of argument whereby Yahya says that Christianity was preached by the simple and the unlearned, but it was accepted by peoples who were very intellectually sophisticated and very philosophically oriented, namely the Greeks and the Romans. So again, we see a very strong influence from Ibn Ishaq on Yahya ibn Adi's religious epistemology in this particular regard. So Yahya continues. It remains then that it was accepted for those reasons by which the truth is accepted, either wholly or in part, and this compels belief in what it contains. These commands and prophecies that the gospel contains not only require that one hasten to accept them, but even demand to be found burdensome, and to be mocked, and fled from, and avoided. To not be accepted at all, and to not be loved in principle. For this reason, if it is accepted by peoples whose numbers are countless, then this is the most convincing proof and the most impartial testament that belief in it is a miracle and the surest sign. The reasons that remain by which, in whole or in part, the truth must be accepted are that what is reported is tangible to the senses and manifestly present, that it is primary in the intellect, that it is made clear through apodictic proof, like the existence of the corners of an isosceles triangle, or it is believed because it is commonly and widely known, and because peoples who could not conspire to agree on a falsehood bear witness to it. So, once again, he appeals to Christianity's widespread acceptance by various peoples, despite the hardships and persecutions they faced, and despite the rigorous demands of the gospel message. So, we see a sociological epistemology similar to his intellectual predecessor Ibn Ishaq, the Nestorian physician. He also outlines other ways one can claim to know the truth. So, for instance, apodictic or self-evident proofs, such as the truths of mathematics and geometry. He also does mention evidence from sense data, so observable or empirical proofs. He doesn't seem to claim that the truth of the gospel is based on self-evident or apodictic proofs. We'll see later on that Yahya, unlike the previous two thinkers we've discussed, he places much more epistemic weight, as it were, on sense data and miracles and wonders in his religious epistemology. So he elaborates here. A reason for its acceptance, other than these reasons, is that acceptance and credence in it is only because those who preach it demonstrate it through signs and miracles of which man's inability to perform bears witness, that they are not possible without the help of the Creator, blessed be his name. Only those who are good and pure are able to perform them, those who are excellent and trustworthy, who only speak the pure truth untainted by falsehood, only that which is wholly beneficial unmixed with harm. So here, as we've said, much more epistemic value is placed on miracles compared to the Nestorian philosophers of Ibn Tayyib or Ibn Ishaq. So for Yahya ibn Adi, miracles and wonders are very important for his religious epistemology. It is one of, if not the main way by which we know or we discern religious truths. That the first preachers of Christianity performed miracles is considered powerful, even decisive proof that they bear the true message of the Creator of the universe. If this is the case, and if what is contained in the gospel is not ascertained by all peoples who accept it through the senses or through its being materially present, nor is it one of the first principles in the intellect, nor is it ascertainable by apodictic proofs from the nature of things, and not something that is widely and commonly known, the truth of which is undisputed, then it necessarily follows that it was accepted and believed on account of the miraculous signs that those who preached it used to demonstrate it. And so the gospel is not accepted through sense data in the strict sort of empiricist sense, nor was it known through apodictic proofs. So he explicitly says it's not known through the first principles in the intellect, but rather it is accepted on the basis of the miracles performed by those who preached it, which we could argue is a form of evidentialism if we want to count miracles as quote-unquote evidence. It might be more appropriate to describe it as fideism, believing in the miracles themselves, and those miracles lend weight or lend credence to the truth claims of Christianity. So depending on your perspective, we could describe this as a form of evidentialism, perhaps theological evidentialism, or fideism, depending on, as we said, one's perspective. Concluding, he says, it is not at all possible to believe that those who are preached to believe those preaching if what they preach is completely devoid of the reasons by which the truth is accepted, which we have enumerated. It follows that those who accepted it because they witnessed the miracles that the preachers worked, which are impossible for humans. This confirms what we wanted to prove about the truth of what the pure gospel contains, which is that the peoples who were called to believe it only did so because of signs and miracles that God worked by the hands of those who preached it. And he concludes with a doxology, thanks be to God always. So, to summarize Yahya's epistemology. So, he's a much stronger view of miracles than Ibn Ishaq or Ibn Tayyib. A great deal of epistemic value is placed on the sociological consequences of Christianity. Those who accepted it did so in spite of the hardships that necessarily followed, and thus they presumably would not have done so without very good reason. So we see a rejection of the hard rationalism of Ibn Tayyib, who places really no weight or very, very little weight on miracles and wonders in religious epistemology. So we have a rejection of his sort of hard rationalistic epistemology. And we also see a rejection of sort of a strict empiricism. So Christianity is not known through sense data. The primary sense datum, as it were, that Christianity is known by is the miracles and wonders performed by those who first preached it. So Christianity is not known primarily through empirical evidence or apodictic proofs, but in the miraculous witness of those who first preached it and embraced it. And thus we can point to a strong sort of fideist dimension in Ibn Adi's religious epistemology compared to his the two other thinkers that we've discussed in this presentation. Thank you for watching. That that is the conclusion of our presentation. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and click subscribe.